In the vast darkness between stars, where silence reigns supreme and only the bravest dare to venture, there exists a truth that every spacefaring civilization learns too late: never underestimate a species that climbed from the bottom of a gravity well by sheer stubbornness and spite. The Zephyrian Dominion had conquered 47 star systems. Their fleet of crystalline warships had never known defeat. Their admirals spoke in hushed tones of legendary victories and the submission of entire worlds. They believed themselves the apex predators of the galaxy. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. What happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? The universe is about to find out, and the answer will echo across the stars for generations to come. This is the story of first contact gone catastrophically wrong, where pride meets determination, and where a species that should have been easy prey becomes the nightmare that haunts the dreams of galactic empires. Welcome to humanity's debut on the cosmic stage. They weren't invited to the party, but they're about to crash it in spectacular fashion. Admiral Kethvar stood on the command deck of the Stellar Dominance, his forearms crossed in a gesture that his subordinates had learned to recognize as supreme confidence. The massive crystalline warship hummed with energy, its bioorganic hull pulsing with bioluminescent veins that carried power throughout the vessel. Around him, the bridge crew of the Zephyrian Dominion worked with practiced efficiency, their tentacled appendages dancing across control surfaces that responded to both touch and thought. Through the translucent walls of the bridge, space stretched endlessly in all directions. But this wasn't empty space. The Stellar Dominance was surrounded by the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. 300 Zephyrian warships hung in perfect formation, each one a masterpiece of biotechnology and military engineering. Their hulls shifted and rippled like living creatures, which in many ways they were. The Zephyrians had long ago abandoned the crude metals and plastics that primitive species used for their vessels. Instead, they grew their ships from specially engineered organisms that could adapt, heal, and evolve. "Admiral," the communications officer's melodic voice carried across the bridge, "we're receiving final confirmation from all squadron leaders. The fleet is ready to begin the next phase of expansion." Kethvar's primary eyes glowed with satisfaction while his secondary pair scanned the tactical displays. The target system lay just beyond the edge of their sensor range, a small yellow star with several rocky planets. Initial long-range scans had detected primitive electromagnetic emissions from the third planet, indicating a young civilization that had barely begun to explore beyond their own atmosphere. It would be another easy conquest, another star system added to the ever-growing Dominion. "Status report from the advanced scouts?" Kethvar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never experienced defeat. 3 scout vessels completed their reconnaissance 47 cycles ago, reported the tactical officer, his bioluminescent patches flickering as he accessed the data streams directly through his neural interface. The indigenous species calls themselves humans. They appear to be bipedal, carbon-based lifeforms with a single head and 4 limbs. Technologically primitive. No evidence of faster-than-light travel, though they have achieved basic spaceflight within their own system. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in amusement. Bipedal? How do they maintain balance? And only 4 limbs? How inefficient. The bridge crew shared in their admiral's amusement, the sound of clicking mandibles and harmonious trills filling the air. "Sir," the science officer interjected, "there is one unusual characteristic worth noting. The planet appears to have an unusually high gravity well, and the atmospheric composition suggests the species evolved in a rather hostile environment. They also seem to have a remarkable diversity of climates and ecosystems on a single world." "Interesting, but irrelevant," Kethvar dismissed with a wave of his upper left arm. "High gravity merely means they'll be slower and weaker in proper atmospheric conditions. We've encountered hardy species before. They all submit eventually." The admiral moved to the central command platform, his movements graceful despite his imposing 3-meter height. The Zephyrians had evolved in the low-gravity environment of their homeworld's vast moon system, giving them tall, elegant frames and an innate understanding of 3-dimensional movement. Their success in conquering other species came not just from their advanced technology, but from their ability to think and fight in ways that planet-bound creatures simply couldn't comprehend. "Display the tactical overview," Kethvar ordered. The bridge filled with a holographic representation of local space. The 47 conquered systems of the Dominion glowed in soft blue light, connected by the graceful arcs of established hyperspace routes. At the edge of this network sat their target system, pulsing with a faint amber glow. Sol System, the navigation officer announced. Third planet designated as Earth by the inhabitants. Estimated population of 7 billion individuals. They appear to have fragmented into numerous tribal groupings they call nations, suggesting they haven't yet achieved proper unified governance. Even better, Kefvar mused. Divided species are always easier to conquer. We can play their factions against each other, offer some groups power over others. Standard procedure. The communications array suddenly chimed with an incoming priority message. The officer manning the station looked puzzled as she processed the information. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the advanced scouts. This is unusual. Explain, Kefvar's tone carried a hint of annoyance. The scouts should have maintained communications silence until the main fleet arrived. Sir, the scouts report that they were detected. A moment of silence fell over the bridge. Detection by a primitive species was not just unusual, it was virtually impossible. Zephyrian stealth technology was based on quantum manipulation of spacetime itself. Their ships existed in a state of dimensional flux that made them invisible to virtually every form of sensor technology the galaxy had ever developed. Detected how? Kefvar's voice carried a dangerous edge. The humans apparently tracked them using some form of electromagnetic radiation detection. They call it radar and radio telescopes. The scouts report that the humans not only detected them but attempted to initiate communication. Kefvar's secondary eyes narrowed. Attempted communication? Did our scouts respond? No, sir. They maintained protocol and withdrew to safe distance. But, Admiral. The communications officer hesitated. The humans' attempts at communication weren't random. They used mathematical sequences, prime numbers, and what appeared to be representations of atomic structures. Sir, they were trying to establish that they were intelligent. The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the bioorganic systems. Kefvar processed this information, his tactical mind already adapting to this minor complication. So the humans had detected the scouts and tried to talk to them. Primitive species often did unexpected things when faced with technology they couldn't understand. It changed nothing. Any other complications? He asked. The scouts did observe some unusual behavior after the detection event. The humans significantly increased their space-based activities. They launched multiple reconnaissance satellites and appear to have begun some form of defensive preparations. Defensive preparations? Kefvar's amusement returned. What could a species without faster-than-light travel possibly do to prepare for our arrival? They can't even reach their own system's outer planets with any efficiency. The tactical officer brought up additional data streams. Sir, the humans do appear to have an unusually large number of orbital installations and spacecraft for a species at their technological level. They also seem to have developed remarkably efficient chemical propulsion systems and have established permanent habitats on their moon and several space stations. Still irrelevant, Kefvar declared. Chemical propulsion against quantum-entangled bioships? They might as well throw rocks at us. But something nagged at the back of his mind. In his 2 centuries of conquest, he had learned that unusual characteristics in a species often indicated hidden strengths. The humans had detected stealth technology that had never been detected before. They had recognized intelligence when confronted with the incomprehensible. And they had immediately begun preparing for something they couldn't possibly understand. Communications, he ordered, send a message to all squadron leaders. We proceed as planned, but I want full battle readiness maintained throughout the approach. If these humans want to try something foolish, we'll be ready. Sir, the science officer spoke up again, consulting her bioorganic interface. There's something else about this system that's worth noting. The electromagnetic spectrum analysis suggests the humans have developed an unusual variety of energy sources. They appear to be using everything from controlled nuclear reactions to solar collection, hydroelectric generation, and even wind and wave power. For a species at their level, this represents remarkable adaptability. Adaptability, HFY repeated thoughtfully. In nature, adaptability often correlated with survival instinct. And species with strong survival instincts sometimes did unexpected things when cornered. Admiral, the navigation officer announced, all ships report ready for hyperspace transition. HFY took one final look at the tactical display. 300 of the most advanced warships ever created, crewed by the most successful military force in galactic history, against a single planet full of primitive bipeds who had just barely learned to leave their gravity well. The outcome was inevitable. The only question was whether the humans would surrender immediately upon seeing the fleet, or if they would provide a few moments of entertainment before their inevitable defeat. Begin hyperspace transition, Admiral HFY commanded. Today, we add another star to the Dominion. The stellar dominance and her escorts shimmered and vanished, leaving empty space behind them. In the quantum tunnels of hyperspace, the greatest fleet ever assembled raced toward what its commander believed would be another routine conquest. Admiral HFY had no way of knowing that he was leading his ships toward a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history turning disadvantages into weapons, obstacles into opportunities, and impossible situations into victories. He was about to encounter a race that had looked at the hostility of their own world and decided to make it their strength, a species that had gazed up at the stars and decided that nothing would keep them from reaching out and claiming them. The humans had detected the scouts not through superior technology, but through sheer bloody-minded determination to notice everything around them. They had recognized intelligence not because they were smart, but because they refused to assume they were the smartest thing in the universe. And, when they began their defensive preparations, they did so with the same methodical thoroughness that had carried them from caves to space stations. The Zephyrian fleet was flying toward Earth with 300 ships and absolute confidence in their superiority. The humans were waiting for them with something far more dangerous than superior technology or greater numbers. They were waiting with the accumulated fury of a species that had never learned how to quit. Admiral Saracen stood in the command center of the Unity Station, Earth's premier orbital defense platform, watching the holographic display that showed the edge of the solar system. The massive station hummed with activity as technicians and officers prepared for what everyone hoped would never come. 3 days had passed since the long-range sensors had detected the approach of what could only be described as an alien fleet. Unlike the elegant bioorganic vessels of the Zephyrians, Unity Station was a monument to human engineering philosophy: if it works, make it bigger, stronger, and more redundant. The station was a sprawling complex of interconnected modules, weapons platforms, shield generators, and docking bays that had been under constant construction and expansion for the past decade. Its hull was scarred from micrometeorite impacts and bore the patches and modifications that spoke of a species that never stopped improving their tools. Report, Admiral Chen commanded, her voice carrying the calm authority that had earned her command of humanity's first line of defense. Ma'am, Captain Rodriguez called out from his position at the sensor array, we've got confirmed hyperspace emergence at the edge of the system. 300 contacts, various sizes, all emitting energy signatures we've never seen before. Admiral Chen nodded grimly. When the alien scouts had been detected 3 weeks earlier, the global response had been swift and unprecedented. For the first time in human history, every major nation had put aside their differences and worked together toward a common goal. The United Earth Defense Force had been established in record time, combining resources, personnel, and technology from every corner of the globe. Distance and estimated time to intercept? Chen asked. They're maintaining position at approximately 40 AU from the Sun, reported Lieutenant Commander Singh from the tactical station. If they continue at their current approach vector and speed, they'll reach Earth orbit in approximately 6 hours. 6 hours, Chen repeated softly. 6 hours for humanity to prove that they belonged among the stars, or 6 hours until their extinction. Status report from the fleet? All Earth Defense Force vessels report ready for combat, Captain Torres announced from the communications station. The Indomitable and her battle group are holding position at Luna. The Defiant, Resolute, and Unconquered are stationed at the asteroid belt with their support squadrons. All orbital defense platforms are online and ready. Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of pride. The human fleet was nothing like the elegant alien ships they faced. Where the Zephyrian vessels were grown, human ships were built. Where alien technology flowed like living tissue, human engineering was angular, armored, and aggressive. The ships bore names that spoke to humanity's character: indomitable, defiant, resolute, unconquered. They were the products of a species that had learned to fight everything from the weather to each other, and had gotten very good at both. "Admiral," came a voice from behind her. She turned to see Dr. Elizabeth Kowalski, the lead xenobiologist for the project, approaching with a tablet in her hands. "Doctor, tell me you have something useful." "We've been analyzing every bite of data from the scout encounters," Dr. Kowalski said, her accent carrying traces of her Polish heritage. "The interesting thing is what we're not seeing. Their stealth technology is incredibly advanced, but once we knew what to look for, we found traces of their presence throughout the system." "How long have they been watching us?" "Based on the pattern analysis, we estimate they've had scouts in our system for at least 6 months. They've been observing us, cataloging our capabilities, learning our weaknesses." Admiral Chen felt a cold anger building in her chest. 6 months of being watched like lab rats, studied and assessed for conquest. What else do we know about them? Their ships appear to be biomechanical hybrids. Living technology, but guided by intelligence. The energy signatures suggest they have power sources that operate on principles we don't fully understand. And, Admiral. Dr. Kowalski hesitated. "Based on the scout ship configurations and the approaching fleet composition, we believe these beings have done this before." "Many times." "Conquerors," Chen said flatly. "Professional conquerors," Dr. Kowalski corrected. "This isn't a first contact scenario gone wrong. This is a deliberate invasion by a species that has perfected the art of subjugating other worlds." Admiral Chen turned back to the tactical display. 300 alien ships against humanity's hastily assembled defense force. On paper, it was no contest. The aliens had faster-than-light travel, energy weapons that defied understanding, and ships that could probably survive anything humanity could throw at them. But humans had never been much for following what was written on paper. "Incoming transmission from the alien fleet," Captain Torres announced suddenly. "They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies, using mathematical progressions to establish basic communication protocols." "Put it through," Chen ordered. A holographic display shifted to show a figure that was clearly not human. Admiral Kethvar appeared as a towering, elegant being with flowing appendages and eyes that seemed to glow with their own light. When he spoke, the universal translator that human scientists had hastily developed did its best to convert his words into something comprehensible. "Primitive beings of the third planet," Kethvar's voice carried unmistakable arrogance. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Dominion. You have been selected for inclusion in our empire. Your resistance is not required, but your cooperation will determine the extent of your species' survival." Admiral Chen stepped forward, ensuring she was visible to whatever camera system the aliens were using. "Admiral Kethvar, I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. I'm afraid we're not interested in joining your empire. You're in our system uninvited, and we'd appreciate it if you'd leave." The silence that followed stretched for several seconds. Then, an odd sound came through the communication system that the human analysts would later identify as alien laughter. "Your bravery is admirable but pointless," Kethvar replied. "You faced the combined might of the Zephyrian Dominion, conquerors of 47 star systems. Your primitive technology cannot stand against us. Surrender now, and your species will be given positions of servitude. Resist, and face extinction." "Counteroffer," Admiral Chen said, her voice carrying the same calm authority she'd used when facing down pirates in the asteroid belts. "You leave our system now, and we'll pretend this never happened. Stay, and we'll show you why humanity earned its place in this galaxy the hard way." This time, the alien laughter was unmistakably mocking. "Your courage borders on insanity. Very well. You have one of your hours to witness our power and reconsider. After that, we will demonstrate why 47 civilizations chose surrender over destruction." The communication ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. "Well," Captain Rodriguez said after a moment, "that could have gone better." "Could have gone worse too," Admiral Chen replied. "At least now we know where we stand." They're professional conquerors who expect us to roll over like every other species they've encountered. Admiral, Dr. Kowalski spoke up, there's something else you should know. During that conversation, our sensors detected some interesting fluctuations in their ship configurations. When you refused their demands, several of their vessels shifted position slightly. They're not just arrogant, they're surprised. Surprised how? I think they've never had a species refuse them before. Not immediately, anyway. They expected us to surrender as soon as we saw their fleet. Admiral Chan smiled grimly. Then, they don't understand humans very well yet. How long until they reach weapons range? Based on their current approach speed, approximately 45 minutes until they're in range of our outer defense perimeter, Captain Rodriguez reported. Signal all ships, Admiral Chan ordered. Battle stations. Today we find out if humanity is ready for the galaxy, or if the galaxy is ready for humanity. As the alert klaxons began sounding throughout Unity Station and, across the human fleet, Admiral Chen watched the alien vessels approaching on the tactical display. 300 ships crewed by beings who had never known defeat, advancing against a species that had never learned to quit. The Zephyrians had conquered 47 star systems through superior technology and ruthless efficiency. They had faced species more advanced than humans, more numerous than humans, and more militarily organized than humans. But they had never faced a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history fighting uphill battles against impossible odds and finding ways to win anyway. In 35 minutes, Admiral Kethvar was going to discover what happened when an irresistible force met the most stubborn species in the galaxy. As the alien fleet began to accelerate toward Earth, every human ship, station, and defensive platform prepared for battle. Not because they thought they could win, but because they had never let impossibility stop them before. The galaxy was about to learn why humans named their ships Defiant, Indomitable, and Unconquered. And why, in the entire history of their species, they had never built a ship named Surrender. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the Stellar Dominance, watching the primitive human fleet arrange itself into what could generously be called battle formations. His secondary eyes flickered with amusement at the crude metal vessels that dared to position themselves between his fleet and their planet. The human ships were angular, ugly things that looked more like flying fortresses than proper starships. They bristled with what appeared to be kinetic weapons, missile launchers, and primitive energy projectors. Tactical analysis complete, announced his weapons officer, her bioluminescent patches pulsing with data streams. The human fleet consists of approximately 50 vessels of varying classes. Their largest ships appear to be roughly one-third the size of our smallest frigates. Energy signatures suggest they're using fusion reactors for power, and their weapons appear to be primarily kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives. Chemical explosives? Kethvar's mandibles clicked in disbelief. They're planning to fight us with chemical explosives? The analysis also indicates they've deployed some form of defensive satellites throughout their system, the tactical officer continued. Thousands of small objects in various orbital patterns. Purpose unknown, but they appear to be actively scanning our approach. Admiral Kethvar considered this information. The humans had used their warning hour to deploy additional defenses rather than surrender. It was either remarkable courage or remarkable stupidity. In his experience, primitive species rarely understood the difference. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Advance to engagement range. We'll demonstrate our superiority quickly and give them one final chance to surrender before we destroy them. The Zephyrian fleet moved forward with predatory grace, their biomechanical ships flowing through space like hunting creatures. Each vessel was a masterpiece of evolved technology, able to adapt its configuration in real time to meet changing battlefield conditions. Their weapons systems were based on quantum manipulation and exotic energy projection that could tear apart matter at the subatomic level. As they advanced, Admiral Kethvar noted that the human ships were not retreating. Instead, they were moving into what appeared to be overlapping defensive positions, their formations tight and disciplined despite their primitive technology. Interesting, he mused. They show more tactical awareness than expected. Admiral, the communications officer announced, we're receiving multiple tight beam transmissions from the human fleet. They appear to be coordinating their positions. Can we intercept their communications? Negative, sir. They're using some form of quantum encryption that's actually quite sophisticated for their technological level. Admiral Kefvar's confidence wavered slightly. First, they had detected his scouts. Then, they had recognized intelligence and attempted communication. Now they were using encryption techniques that should have been beyond their capabilities. The humans were proving to be more resourceful than anticipated. No matter, he decided. Superior resourcefulness cannot overcome superior technology. Signal all ships to prepare for combat demonstration. Meanwhile, aboard the human flagship Indomitable, Admiral Chen watched the alien fleet approach with grim determination. The massive dreadnought was the pride of the Earth Defense Force, armed with railguns, particle beams, nuclear missiles, and a few experimental weapons that the scientists weren't entirely sure would work. Enemy fleet at 20,000 kilometers and closing, reported Captain Martinez from the sensor station. They're maintaining formation and appear to be targeting our primary vessels. Signal the fleet, Admiral Chen ordered. Execute pattern Delta. All ships, weapons free when they enter the engagement zone. The human fleet shifted formation with practiced precision. This wasn't the first time they had faced overwhelming odds. Humanity had spent centuries perfecting the art of asymmetric warfare, from ancient battles where small forces defeated massive armies to modern conflicts where technological underdogs found ways to level the playing field. Admiral, called out Dr. Kowalski from her position at the Scientific Analysis Station, were detecting energy buildup in the lead alien vessels. Whatever weapons they're charging, they're unlike anything in our databases. Time to weapons range? 30 seconds, ma'am. Admiral Chen took a deep breath. This was it. Humanity's first real test among the stars. Win or lose, they would face it as they had faced every other challenge in their history, together, and with absolute refusal to give up. All ships, she announced across the fleet communication network, this is Admiral Chen. Today we stand for Earth, for humanity, and for our right to exist among the stars. We face an enemy that believes we're primitive and weak. Let's show them what humans do to bullies. The first shots came from the Zephyrian fleet. Beams of coherent energy lashed out across space, weapons that could disintegrate asteroids and melt through any known material. They struck the lead human vessels with devastating force. And the human ships absorbed the hits and kept coming. Admiral Kefvar stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. The energy projectors that had destroyed the shields and armor of countless enemy vessels had struck the human ships directly. There should have been nothing left but expanding clouds of vaporized metal and organic matter. Instead, the human ships showed damage but remained intact and functional. Worse, they were returning fire. How are they surviving our primary weapons? He demanded. Admiral, his science officer reported with clear confusion, their ships appear to be using some form of reactive armor system. The outer hulls are designed to absorb and dissipate energy through multiple layers of different materials. But, sir, this isn't advanced technology. It's just incredibly robust engineering. The human return fire began reaching the Zephyrian fleet, and Admiral Kefvar experienced his first moment of genuine surprise in decades. The primitive kinetic weapons and chemical explosives struck his ships with tremendous force, causing his biomechanical vessels to ripple and adapt. But the sheer volume and coordination of the human attack was unlike anything he had encountered. They're using overlapping fields of fire, his tactical officer reported with growing alarm. Every shot is coordinated to hit the same target zones simultaneously. Admiral, they're not fighting like a primitive species. They're fighting like a military force with centuries of combat experience. And, indeed they were. The human fleet fought with the accumulated wisdom of every battle their species had ever waged. They used crossfire patterns developed in ancient naval warfare, concentration of force tactics from tank battles, and coordination strategies from air combat. Each ship captain was a veteran of conflicts in the asteroid belts, and they had spent their entire careers learning to fight with inferior equipment against superior enemies. Damage report. Admiral Kefvar commanded as another wave of human fire struck his flagship. Minor hull damage to 40% of the fleet, came the response. Biohealing systems are compensating, but, Admiral, their weapons are actually penetrating our defensive systems. This shouldn't be possible. It shouldn't have been possible. But humans had built their weapons specifically to punch through things that should have been impossible to penetrate. Their railguns accelerated projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Their missiles carried nuclear warheads designed to crack open armored bunkers. Their particle beams were focused with the same precision they used to perform surgery and cut through asteroids. "Signal all ships," Admiral Kethvar ordered, his confidence shaken but his pride intact. "Full attack formation. Overwhelming force. End this quickly." The Zephyrian fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy weapons that bent spacetime, quantum disruptors that unraveled matter at the molecular level, and bioorganic projectiles that should have overwhelmed any defense. But the humans had spent their hour of warning time well. As the alien attack reached its peak, thousands of small objects throughout the solar system suddenly activated. The defensive satellites that the Zephyrians had detected began broadcasting jamming signals, deploying chaff clouds, and launching coordinated missile strikes. "We're being attacked from multiple directions," the tactical officer reported with growing panic. "Sir, the humans have weaponized their entire system." Admiral Chen watched with grim satisfaction as her carefully laid plans unfolded. The human fleet had never been intended to win a stand-up fight against superior alien technology. Instead, they had prepared the battlefield itself. Every piece of space debris, every abandoned satellite, every mining platform had been hastily converted into a weapons platform or sensor node. "All stations," she announced, "execute Hammer Protocol." Throughout the solar system, hidden weapons platforms revealed themselves. Mass drivers built into asteroids began launching projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. Nuclear mines disguised as space debris detonated in carefully coordinated patterns. And, from Earth itself, orbital bombardment platforms that had been disguised as communications satellites opened fire with weapons that had been designed to crack open enemy bunkers from orbit. The Zephyrian fleet found themselves not fighting 50 human ships, but fighting the entire solar system. Every piece of matter larger than a basketball had been turned into either a weapon or a sensor, and humanity was using all of them with the same methodical thoroughness they applied to everything else. Admiral Kethvar watched his tactical displays with growing horror as his fleet took damage from weapons platforms that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. The humans weren't just fighting with their ships. They had turned their entire star system into a weapon. "How many weapons platforms do they have?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir," came the shaken response. "They appear to be using everything. Asteroids, abandoned equipment, even what appear to be converted civilian vessels. Sir, I'm reading weapons signatures from their planet's moon. They've fortified their entire system." For the first time in his career, Admiral Kethvar considered the possibility that he might have underestimated his enemy. The humans were proving to be far more dangerous than any species he had ever encountered. Not because their technology was superior, but because they refused to fight fair. And, as the battle raged on, he was beginning to realize that fighting fair was a luxury that only species with technological superiority could afford. The humans were fighting to survive, and they were using every dirty trick, clever strategy, and desperate gambit their species had ever developed. The Zephyrian fleet was learning what it meant to fight a species that had earned their place in the galaxy through sheer bloody-minded determination. And they were beginning to understand why 47 star systems of surrender hadn't prepared them for this moment. The battle was just beginning, and already nothing was going according to plan. The battle had been raging for 3 hours, and Admiral Kethvar was experiencing something he had never felt before: doubt. His fleet of 300 superior warships was being systematically damaged by what should have been a minor skirmish with a primitive species. The tactical display showed a nightmare scenario that defied everything he understood about space warfare. "Damage report," he commanded through gritted mandibles. 60 ships with significant damage, 12 vessels operating at reduced capacity, and we've lost contact with the frigate Voidseeker, his operations officer reported, her usually melodic voice tight with stress. "Sir, their weapons appear to be specifically designed to counter our biomechanical systems." Admiral Kethvar's secondary eyes focused on the tactical display showing the wreckage of the Voidseeker. The frigate had been caught in a crossfire from 3 human destroyers and had simply stopped working. Not destroyed in any conventional sense, but as if its bioorganic systems had been systematically shut down. How is that possible? He demanded. Admiral, the science officer's report carried a note of disbelief. The humans appear to be using some form of biological warfare against our ships. Their projectiles aren't just kinetic weapons. They're carrying payloads designed to disrupt organic tissue. The revelation hit Admiral Kefvar like a physical blow. The humans had somehow analyzed samples from the scout encounters and developed weapons specifically designed to kill Zephyrian biotechnology. In 3 weeks, they had accomplished what should have taken years of research. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. It's the human Admiral. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main display, and Admiral Kefvar noticed immediately that she looked different. Where before she had seemed merely determined, now she carried the confident bearing of someone who had just proven a point. Admiral Kefvar, she said without preamble, I believe we need to talk. You have fought more effectively than anticipated, Kefvar admitted grudgingly. But, you cannot sustain this level of combat indefinitely. My fleet is still vastly superior to your forces. Your fleet is dying, Admiral Chen replied bluntly. And, you know it. Your bioships are beautiful pieces of engineering, but they have a fundamental weakness. They're alive. And humans have spent our entire evolutionary history learning how to kill living things. The cold truth of her words settled over the bridge like a shroud. The humans hadn't just studied Zephyrian technology during their preparation time. They had treated the alien scouts like a medical problem to be solved. When faced with living ships, they had responded with the same methodical approach they used to fight diseases, parasites, and biological threats. Moreover, Admiral Chen continued, you're fighting in our system, by our rules. Every piece of debris, every abandoned mining platform, every communications satellite is now a weapon pointed at your fleet. You wanted to demonstrate your superiority, Admiral. Instead, you've demonstrated ours. Admiral Kefvar's pride flared. We have conquered 47 star systems. We are the apex predators of this galaxy. Were, Admiral Chen corrected. You were the apex predators. Until today, you've never fought a species that earned its place in the galaxy through warfare. Every other species you conquered was peaceful, wasn't it? They built their civilizations through cooperation and mutual understanding. They probably never even considered that someone might attack them without provocation. The accuracy of her assessment was stunning. Every species the Dominion had conquered had indeed been peaceful. They had developed faster than light travel, advanced technology, and sophisticated civilizations. But they had never developed the military mindset that drove every aspect of human society. We, Admiral Chen continued, are not a peaceful species. We've been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We've spent our entire history turning every possible advantage into a weapon and every weakness into a strength. You brought superior technology to fight us. We brought superior tactics, superior strategy, and superior understanding of what warfare actually means. As if to punctuate her point, another wave of coordinated fire from hidden weapons platforms struck the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Kefvar watched as 3 more of his ships began showing the telltale signs of biosystem failure. What are your terms? He asked, the words bitter in his mouth. Terms? Admiral Chen looked genuinely surprised. Admiral, we haven't started negotiating yet. This is just us explaining why you're about to lose. Before Admiral Kefvar could respond, his tactical officer's voice cut across the bridge with barely controlled panic. Sir! We're detecting massive energy signatures from the inner system. Multiple large vessels approaching at high velocity. The main display shifted to show new contacts emerging from behind Earth's moon. Ships that were larger than anything the humans had shown before, moving with purpose and speed that indicated they had been lying in wait. Admiral Chen said with what could only be described as a predatory smile, I'd like you to meet the Second Fleet. While you were fighting our defensive forces, they've been positioning themselves to cut off your retreat. Admiral Kefvar stared at the display in horror. The humans had been fighting a delaying action while positioning a second fleet to trap his forces in system. The tactical brilliance of it was stunning. While he had been focused on demonstrating superiority against what appeared to be their primary forces, they had been maneuvering him into a trap. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our long-range sensors would have detected additional ships." "Your long-range sensors were designed to detect energy signatures and metal hulls," Admiral Chen explained. "The Second Fleet has been running completely silent, powered down to minimum life support, hidden in the shadow of planetary bodies." "Admiral, you've been fighting humans. Did you really think we would only have one plan?" The Second Fleet ships were different from the defensive forces that had been engaging the Zephyrians. These vessels were larger, more heavily armed, and bore names that spoke to humanity's most celebrated military victories: Yorktown, Midway, Gettysburg, Stalingrad. They had been designed not for defense, but for the complete destruction of enemy forces. "All Zephyrian vessels," Admiral Chen's voice carried across all communication frequencies, "you are surrounded. Your retreat vector is blocked, your ships are being systematically disabled, and you are fighting in a system that has been specifically prepared for your destruction. You have one opportunity to surrender with honor intact." Admiral Kefvar looked around his bridge at officers who were staring at displays showing an impossible situation. His fleet was trapped between two human forces in a star system that had been turned into a massive weapons platform. Every moment they remained, more of his ships fell to weapons designed specifically to kill biomechanical technology. "Sir," his operations officer said quietly, "even if we could break through their lines, we've taken too much damage to sustain a hyperspace jump. We're trapped." For a species that had never known defeat, the concept was almost incomprehensible. But the tactical reality was undeniable. The humans had outfought, outmaneuvered, and outthought them at every turn. "Admiral Chen," Kefvar said finally, his voice carrying the weight of 47 conquered systems and 2 centuries of victories, "what happens now?" "Now," Admiral Chen replied, "we discuss the terms of your surrender. But first, you're going to signal your government and tell them exactly what happened here. You're going to explain that you encountered a species that doesn't surrender, doesn't submit, and doesn't lose. You're going to recommend that the Zephyrian Dominion find somewhere else to expand. And if my government refuses to accept these terms?" Admiral Chen's smile was cold as vacuum. "Admiral, you came to our system with 300 ships to conquer us. You're about to leave with maybe 100 functional vessels and the certain knowledge that we now know where you came from. If your government wants to continue this conflict, they're welcome to try. But next time, it won't be a defensive battle fought in our system." The threat was clear, and Admiral Kefvar realized with growing horror that it wasn't an empty boast. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that defied their apparent technological level. They had shown tactical brilliance that exceeded anything in Zephyrian military doctrine. And they had done it all while fighting on the defensive. If they ever brought their military capabilities to bear offensively, they would be unstoppable. "You mentioned terms of surrender," Admiral Kefvar said, trying to salvage something from this disaster. "Simple terms," Admiral Chan replied. "You will provide us with complete information about your government, your territory, and your military capabilities. You will establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth and agree to treat humanity as equals. You will withdraw all claims to our system and surrounding space. And you will pay reparations for the unprovoked attack on our territory." Reparations? The concept was foreign to a species accustomed to taking tribute, not paying it. Medical supplies, technology exchanges, and formal recognition of human sovereignty. Nothing that will cripple your empire, but enough to ensure you remember this lesson. Admiral Kefvar considered his options and realized he had none. The humans held every advantage, and they had demonstrated the capability to enforce their demands. "I will need to consult with my government," he said finally. Of course, Admiral Chen agreed. "You have 6 hours. After that, we begin targeting your remaining ships for complete destruction. Oh, and, Admiral? Don't try to call for reinforcements. We've been monitoring your communications since you arrived. Any ship that enters this system will be considered a hostile act and dealt with accordingly." The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Kefvar alone with the worst defeat in Zephyrian military history. He had brought the greatest fleet ever assembled to conquer a primitive species, and instead had been comprehensively outfought by beings who treated warfare as an art form. As he prepared to signal his government with news of their defeat, Admiral Kethvar finally understood what the humans had been trying to tell him from the beginning. They weren't just another species to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous, a race that had earned their place in the galaxy through strength, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Zephyrian Dominion had just encountered humanity at war. And they had learned why, in the entire history of the human language, no one had ever needed to invent a word for surrender. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Ambassador Elena Vesquez stood in the main conference room of Unity Station, looking out at a view that would have been impossible to imagine a year earlier. Beyond the reinforced windows, Zephyrian and human ships worked side by side, conducting joint exercises and technology exchanges. The sleek bioorganic vessels of the former enemy moved in graceful formations alongside the angular, purposeful designs of the Earth Defense Force. The transformation had been remarkable. What began as humanity's first defensive victory had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, the first time the Zephyrian Dominion had been forced to accept another species as true equals. "Ambassador," came a melodic voice from behind her. She turned to see Admiral Kethvar approaching, his movements now familiar after months of negotiations. The former enemy commander had become the primary Zephyrian diplomatic representative to Earth, a position that required him to confront his defeat on a daily basis. "Admiral," Elena replied with genuine warmth. The relationship between the former enemies had evolved from mutual respect born of combat to something approaching friendship. "I trust the morning briefing went well?" "Better than expected," Kethvar admitted, his secondary eyes focusing on the tactical displays that now showed joint human-Zephyrian patrol routes. "Your Admiral Chen has a remarkable ability to see strategic possibilities that my people miss entirely." Elena smiled. Admiral Chen had been promoted to Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces and had spent the past months revolutionizing not just human military doctrine, but helping the Zephyrians understand why their previous conquests had been so easy. The peaceful species they had overwhelmed had simply never developed the military mindset that humans considered natural. "How are your people adjusting to the new reality?" Elena asked. Kethvar's mandibles clicked in what Elena had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a rueful laugh. "Poorly, in many cases. For 2,000 years, we have been the dominant military force in this region of the galaxy. Accepting that we encountered a superior opponent challenges everything we believed about ourselves." "Superior in some ways," Elena corrected diplomatically. "Your technology is still more advanced than ours in many areas. Your ships are more elegant, your energy systems are more efficient, and your understanding of bioengineering exceeds anything we've developed. But, you understand warfare," Kethvar replied bluntly. "You understand strategy, tactics, and the mindset required for victory. We had become complacent, accustomed to overwhelming less militaristic species. When we encountered humans, we learned the difference between conquest and war. The distinction was important. The Zephyrian Dominion had expanded through a series of conquests against species that simply surrendered when faced with superior technology. They had never fought a true war against an opponent that understood military strategy and had the will to resist at any cost. There's been a development," Kethvar continued, his tone becoming more serious. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected movement in the outer territories. The hegemony is mobilizing." Elena felt her blood chill. The hegemony was everything the Zephyrian Dominion had been, but worse. Where the Zephyrians conquered through demonstration of superiority, the hegemony enslaved through absolute brutality. They were a machine empire that converted organic species into servile components of their vast industrial complex. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Based on their movement patterns, approximately 18 months before they reach the outer borders of Dominion space. After that." Kethvar's gesture conveyed futility. "The hegemony has never been defeated. They control over 200 star systems and possess technology that makes even Zephyrian bioengineering seem primitive." Elena considered this information. The alliance between Earth and the Zephyrian Dominion was still fragile, based more on mutual respect than genuine trust. But, if the hegemony was truly as dangerous as reports suggested, humanity and the Dominion might need each other more than either species had anticipated. "What does your government propose?" she asked. "A formal military alliance," HFY replied. "Complete technology sharing, joint fleet operations, and unified strategic command. The Dominion is prepared to offer humans full partnership in exchange for your military expertise." The offer was extraordinary. 6 months ago, the Zephyrians had viewed humans as primitives suitable only for conquest. Now they were offering genuine partnership with a species they had finally recognized as equals. "I'll need to discuss this with Earth Command," Elena said, though she suspected she already knew what the answer would be. Humanity had spent their entire history facing impossible odds. The hegemony sounded like just another impossible enemy. "There's something else," Kefvar added. "Intelligence reports suggest the hegemony has been monitoring our conflict with Earth. They know about human military capabilities." That could be a problem, Elena understated. The element of surprise had been crucial to humanity's victory against the Zephyrians. Against an enemy that came prepared for human tactics, the battle would be far more difficult. Or it could be an advantage, came a new voice from the entrance. Admiral Chen entered the conference room, her uniform bearing the new insignia of Supreme Commander. "If they know about our capabilities, they also know about our willingness to use them." "Admiral," Elena acknowledged. "I take it you've been briefed on the hegemony situation?" "Fully briefed," Chen confirmed. "And I've been reviewing the tactical data. The hegemony is dangerous, but they have a fundamental weakness: they've never faced united opposition. Every species they've conquered fought alone. They've never dealt with a coordinated alliance between multiple military powers." Admiral Chen activated the main display, showing a star chart of the local galactic region. Red zones marked hegemony territory, blue showed the Zephyrian Dominion, and a small yellow dot indicated the Sol system. "The hegemony expects to face the Dominion alone," Chen explained. "They've probably calculated their victory based on historical performance against isolated opponents. What they won't expect is a combined human Zephyrian force using integrated tactics." "You believe we can defeat them?" Kefvar asked, hope creeping into his voice. "I believe we can make them regret starting a fight," Chen replied with characteristic directness. "The hegemony has superior numbers and technology. But they've never fought an enemy that refuses to lose. And they've certainly never dealt with human military doctrine applied through Zephyrian biotechnology." Elena watched the two military leaders discuss strategy with growing excitement. The combination of human tactical thinking and Zephyrian technological capabilities could indeed prove formidable. More importantly, it represented something entirely new in galactic history, a true alliance between equals rather than the domination of one species over another. "What would you need to make this work?" Elena asked. "Time," Admiral Chen replied immediately. "At least 12 months to fully integrate our forces and develop combined tactics. Full access to Zephyrian biotechnology, particularly ship design and weapons systems. And complete operational command authority during combat situations." The last point was the most significant. Admiral Chen was asking the Zephyrians to place their forces under human strategic command, an unprecedented level of trust for a species accustomed to domination. "The Dominion Council has already agreed to these terms," Kefvar announced, surprising both humans. The defeated Sol convinced them that human military leadership is superior to our own. Admiral Chen and Elena exchanged glances. The admission represented a complete transformation in Zephyrian thinking, from arrogant superiority to genuine respect for human capabilities. "There's one more consideration," Elena said carefully. "If we do form this alliance and defeat the hegemony, what happens after?" "The galaxy will need new leadership, a new balance of power." "We've discussed this extensively," Kefvar replied. "The Dominion proposes a confederation model. Each species maintains sovereignty over their territory while contributing to collective defense. Humans would have equal voice in all decisions, despite controlling fewer systems." It was an extraordinary offer. The Zephyrians were proposing to share power with a species they had originally intended to conquer, creating a governmental structure based on cooperation rather than domination. "I'll need official authorization from Earth Command," Elena said, "but I can tell you that humanity is interested." Admiral Chen was already deep in strategic calculations. "We'll need to begin joint training exercises immediately. Human crews learning Zephyrian bioship operations, Zephyrian officers understanding human tactical doctrine. And we'll need to develop new weapons systems that combine the best of both technologies." As the three leaders discussed the details of their unprecedented alliance, none of them realized they were witnessing the birth of something that would transform the galaxy. The partnership between humanity and the Zephyrian Dominion would prove to be more than just a military alliance. It would become the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization, one based on mutual respect rather than conquest. The hegemony was indeed mobilizing, convinced of their inevitable victory against the weakened Dominion. They had calculated their strategy based on historical data showing Zephyrian capabilities and the assumption that they would face a divided enemy. They had no way of knowing that they were about to encounter something the galaxy had never seen before, the combined fury of a species that had never learned to surrender, allied with beings who had finally learned what it meant to fight for something greater than conquest. The Battle of Seoul had ended the age of easy conquest. The coming war with the hegemony would determine whether the galaxy's future would be shaped by tyranny or by the revolutionary idea that different species could stand together as equals. Admiral Chen looked out at the joint fleet operations and smiled grimly. The hegemony thought they were bringing overwhelming force against a weakened enemy. Instead, they were about to discover what happened when the most stubborn species in the galaxy found worthy allies and a cause worth fighting for. The age of human isolation was over. The age of galactic partnership was about to begin. And it would be baptized in the fires of a war that would determine the future of every thinking species among the stars. The hegemony wanted a fight. They were about to get one they would never forget.